Picture this. It's February 1936. The Berlin Stock Exchange opens for trading. Within hours, panic erupts. Traders scramble. Fortunes evaporate. The German Empire, once the economic titan of Europe, watches its entire financial system crumble in real time. This isn't just history. This is the story of how the most powerful economy in the world collapsed overnight, triggering a domino effect that would reshape the globe forever. Welcome to the untold secrets of Kaiserreich's economic catastrophe. What you're about to discover will challenge everything you thought you knew about economic stability and the fragility of empires. Let's dive in. The first shocking secret. The victory that planted the seeds of destruction. When Germany won the Weltkrieg in 1919, the world celebrated German dominance. But here's what nobody tells you. That victory came at a devastating cost that would haunt the empire for decades. The German economy was on its knees after 5 brutal years of war. Factories had been converted to military production. Infrastructure was crumbling. The workforce was decimated. Millions of young men never came home. Those who did were broken, traumatized, unable to return to productive work immediately. Germany had borrowed astronomical sums to finance the war effort. The national debt had skyrocketed to levels never seen before in modern history. Victory meant Germany could extract reparations from defeated nations. Yes, but it also meant the empire now had to manage and occupy vast territories across Europe. Belgium, Poland, the Baltic states, Ukraine, all under German control or heavy influence. Each territory required military garrisons, administrative personnel, and constant financial support. The cost of maintaining this empire was bleeding Germany dry from day one. Secret number 2 will blow your mind. The illusion of prosperity that masked the crisis. Throughout the 1920s, Germany appeared to be thriving. Berlin sparkled with wealth. New buildings rose skyward. The stock market soared to unprecedented heights. Foreign investors poured capital into German enterprises. But this prosperity was built on quicksand. The economic boom was fueled almost entirely by speculative investment and creative accounting. German corporations weren't producing real value at levels that justified their stock prices. They were inflating numbers, hiding losses, and creating financial instruments that nobody truly understood. Sound familiar? It should. This exact pattern would repeat itself throughout economic history, from the dot-com bubble to the 2008 financial crisis. The Kaiserreich was pioneering techniques of financial manipulation that would become textbook examples of what not to do. Meanwhile, average German workers weren't seeing the benefits of this supposed boom. Wages stagnated while the cost of living increased. The wealth gap between the industrial elite and the working class widened into a chasm. Social tensions simmered beneath the surface of those glittering Berlin nightclubs. Now here's secret number 3, and this is where it gets truly insane. The Middle Europa trap that strangled economic flexibility. Germany's grand plan for European economic integration, called Mitteleuropa, was supposed to create a unified market that would dominate global trade. The reality, it became an economic straitjacket. German manufacturers became dependent on raw materials from occupied territories. When transportation networks broke down or local resistance disrupted production, entire sectors of the German economy ground to a halt. Factories in Berlin couldn't function without Belgian steel or Ukrainian wheat. This interdependence created cascading vulnerabilities. A problem in one region rippled through the entire system. German economists had created a house of cards where every card supported multiple others. Pull one out, and the whole structure was at risk of collapse. Belgium's manufacturing sector was hit particularly hard. Fiscal chaos combined with transportation problems and metal requisitions led to a general economic breakdown. Factories ran out of raw materials and laid off workers by the thousands. The crisis that started in Belgium spread like wildfire through the integrated Middle Europa system. Secret number 4 reveals the catastrophic timing nobody saw coming. Just as Germany's internal weaknesses were reaching critical mass, the British Empire collapsed in 1925. This wasn't just a political event. It was an economic earthquake that shook global markets to their foundation. Britain had been the world's financial center for over a century. When syndicalist revolution tore through the United Kingdom and shattered the empire, it created immediate chaos in international trade. Credit dried up overnight. Shipping routes became unreliable. The pound sterling, once the world's reserve currency, became worthless paper. German banks had massive exposure to British investments. When those assets evaporated, it created holes in German balance sheets that could never be filled. Insurance companies that had underwritten British trade found themselves facing claims they couldn't possibly pay. The contagion spread through every sector of the German financial system. But here's the truly shocking part. German leadership saw the British collapse and learned nothing. They watched an empire crumble under the weight of overextension and economic mismanagement, then continued down the exact same path. The arrogance was breathtaking. Secret number 5 will make you question everything about economic management. The Dirksen government's paralysis in the face of crisis. When the Berlin Stock Exchange crashed on Black Monday in February 1936, Germany needed decisive action. What they got was hesitation, infighting, and half measures. Chancellor Dirksen's government tried everything traditional economics recommended. They adjusted interest rates. They injected liquidity into banks. They made speeches about confidence and stability. None of it worked. The crash wasn't responding to conventional tools, because this wasn't a conventional crisis. The market crash reverberated around the world for 2 months, getting worse with each passing week. By the end of March, it had bottomed out, but the damage was catastrophic. Unemployment soared, businesses shuttered, life savings disappeared. The social contract between the German government and its people shattered. What makes this even more tragic? The government had warning signs for years. Economic advisors had been sounding alarms about overvalued stocks, unsustainable debt levels, and dangerous dependencies. Politicians ignored them all, preferring to believe the prosperity would continue forever. Here's secret number 6, and this one's particularly fascinating: the role of technological disruption in accelerating the collapse. The 1930s were a period of rapid technological change. New manufacturing processes, communication systems, and transportation methods were revolutionizing how business operated. German industry had been built on the technological advantages of the pre-war era. But by 1936, those advantages were obsolete. Competitors in other nations had developed more efficient production methods. German factories were running on outdated equipment that should have been replaced years ago. The massive debts from war and empire maintenance meant there was no capital available for modernization. German industry was trapped in a death spiral. They couldn't compete without upgrading, but they couldn't afford to upgrade because they weren't competitive. Innovation ground to a halt. Meanwhile, nations that hadn't been burdened by empire, who had sat out the Weltkrieg or been on the losing side, were leapfrogging ahead technologically. They weren't constrained by legacy systems or sunk costs. They could build modern, efficient economies from the ground up. Finally, secret number 7 ties everything together in a way that's both brilliant and terrifying. The psychological factor that turned a crisis into a catastrophe. Economics isn't just about numbers and policies. It's about human psychology, confidence, and belief. By 1936, people had stopped believing in the German economic system. Workers didn't believe they would be paid fairly. Investors didn't believe the market valuations were real. Foreign partners didn't believe Germany could meet its obligations. This collective loss of faith became a self-fulfilling prophecy. When confidence evaporates, economic systems cease to function. Money is based on trust. Credit requires belief in future repayment. Trade depends on confidence in contractual obligations. Once that trust is broken, no amount of gold reserves or policy adjustments can restore it quickly. The German government tried to restore confidence through propaganda and assurances. It had the opposite effect. People saw through the empty promises. They remembered how they'd been told the Middle Europa system was unshakable. They recalled assurances that the stock market was on solid ground. Every broken promise made the next statement less believable. This psychological collapse explains why Black Monday's effects spread so rapidly and devastatingly. It wasn't just an economic crisis. It was a crisis of legitimacy, of belief in the entire system that had governed German life for nearly 2 decades. When people stop believing in the system stops working. So what can we learn from Kaiserreich's economic collapse? First, that victory in war doesn't guarantee economic success. The costs of empire and occupation can outweigh the benefits of conquest. Germany won the Weltkrieg but lost the peace that followed. Second, prosperity built on speculation and debt is an illusion waiting to shatter. Real economic strength comes from productive capacity, fair distribution of wealth, and sustainable practices. Short-term thinking creates long-term disasters. Third, economic integration creates efficiency but also vulnerability. When systems become too interconnected, problems spread faster and hit harder. Redundancy and independence have value that pure efficiency calculations miss. Fourth, timing matters more than we often acknowledge. External shocks can strike at the worst possible moment, turning manageable problems into existential crises. The British collapse hit Germany when it was already teetering on the edge. Fifth, leadership in crisis requires courage and decisiveness. Paralysis and half measures make things worse. The Dirksen government's inability to act boldly sealed Germany's fate. Sometimes the conventional wisdom is wrong and radical action is necessary. Sixth, technological stagnation is economic death in a competitive world. Nations and companies must continuously innovate or they'll be left behind. The cost of maintaining the status quo often exceeds the cost of innovation. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, economic systems depend on trust and belief. Technical solutions can't fix psychological problems. Rebuilding confidence requires transparency, honesty, and delivering on promises. Once credibility is lost, it's incredibly difficult to regain. The Kaiserreich's economic collapse wasn't inevitable. It was the result of specific choices, missed opportunities, and human failures. At every stage, different decisions could have altered the trajectory. That's both frightening and empowering. It means we're not helpless victims of economic forces beyond our control. But it also means we bear responsibility for the choices we make and the systems we build. The warning signs are usually there if we're willing to see them. The question is whether we have the courage to act on what we know, rather than what we wish were true. The story of Kaiserreich reminds us that empires and economies are more fragile than they appear. What seems unshakable one day can crumble the next. Stability requires constant effort, wise policy, and humble recognition of our limitations. Arrogance and overconfidence pave the road to ruin. As we look at our own economic systems today, we can see echoes of Kaiserreich's mistakes. Unsustainable debt levels, speculative bubbles disconnected from real value, overextended global supply chains, growing inequality, technological disruption, political paralysis. Sound familiar? The question isn't whether economic crises will happen. They will. The question is whether we'll learn from history or repeat it. Will we have the wisdom to see problems before they become catastrophes? Will we have the courage to act decisively when action is needed? Now I want to hear from you. Which of these 7 secrets shocked you the most? Do you see parallels between Kaiserreich's collapse and economic situations today? What lessons do you think are most important for modern economies? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And tell us, where are you watching from? What city or country? I love hearing from viewers around the world and learning about your perspectives on these historical events. If you found this video valuable, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to understand how quickly economic stability can vanish. Subscribe for more deep dives into fascinating historical moments that shaped our world. Understanding the past gives us tools to navigate the future. The story of Kaiserreich's collapse isn't just history. It's a warning, a lesson, and a call to action for anyone who cares about economic justice and stability in our own time. See you in the next video. Bye.